Okay, so this is the last video covering topic 5.4 and 5.5, the phases of the Industrial Revolution. And in this video, we kind of zoom out and we basically kind of overview the spread, but especially focused on how new technology and the spread of Industrial Revolution changed the modes or the process of production and the locations of production. So overall, there's two questions that we need to make sure that we answer. How did the Industrial Revolution spread? I think we've seen that pretty much in the last videos, focusing on economic nationalism and state-sponsored industrialization. How did the Industrial Revolution change the modes of production using new sources of power and new industries? Now we're really going to focus on how the locations of manufacture and production changed. And we're going to kind of visit the effect of technology. So we've already identified the characteristics. We've talked about each of the British, Western, and global phase. Now we're explaining how it changes things. So overall, these three phases fundamentally changed how things were produced. Industrialism adopts new sources of power, new technology, and new methods. And where it always starts in textiles, it is always going to spread to other industries. And by the end of this time period, after 1850, we see many different industries adopting the concept of industrialization. Also, this brings people much more stuff because the mass production using technology and power sources, first coal and steam, and later petroleum and electricity, well, they lower the price. Also, the use of steamship and railroads rapidly moves things. So everybody's going to be touched by this. And the second industrial revolution also leads to many new business practices. We see new forms of businesses like monopolies and transnational companies. These are companies that do business in many different areas. Probably the best example would be the Unilever, which produces all sorts of household stuff throughout the world. We see also the flow of money from the Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Company that serve to move money as investments from one country to another. And we also see other forms of business, such as De Beers, the diamond people, really beginning to expand into Africa and other areas. Now, we also see the world becoming smaller because of migrations. People are able to move from country to country, and also we have communications. So the mode of production changes, and it leads to a lot more stuff for people and a lot more larger businesses. Now, when you talk about the overall idea of the areas of production, this is where we're going to see the biggest changes. Prior to this time period, we always see China and India as the arrival point because China and India and Southeast Asia produced what people wanted. So prior to 1750, China, India, and to a lesser extent the Middle East were areas of manufacture. Well, because of the adoption of industrialization after 1750, those areas receive a much smaller share and eventually fall off the list. As you can see, England led the way, followed by Germany and France as the leaders in manufacture. British, German, and French goods were sold across the world, followed up a little bit by the Habsburgs, by Russia, a little bit of India, and the United States is kind of misleading because the United States is really focused on the Americas. Also, our newly industrialized Japan begins to come up there. But the bottom line is this: the center of manufacture moves from East Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East to the West. And it gives states like China a much smaller role. Now, China could have been industrialized. And as a matter of fact, during the song, it almost did industrialize. The issue is this: China fears the outside world, and the Qing leaders have taken great lengths as to close China off to their influence. So China is continuing to resist the outside world under the Qing and essentially did not attempt to industrialize till it was way too late. In 1861, they attempted to combine the ideas of industrialization with their traditional Neo Confucianism under what's known as the self strengthening movement, and it was an absolute failure. Ladies and gentlemen, China is about to fall big time. India, too, was also a main area. And remember, Indian empires under the Mughal had great influence in Southeast Asia. But India also loses its role as a global manufacturer because Great Britain took it over. In the 1850s, there was a revolt, and the English East India Company was disbanded, and the English just took over India. And to prevent India and Indian textiles and Indian mining from competing with Western, especially British textiles, India was deindustrialized. The British passed laws that prevented mining, that prevented the making of cotton cloth. As a matter of fact, one of the laws required that the raw cotton grown in India be sent directly to Great Britain and sold back into India as finished goods. Now, you have to understand something. Yes, native Indians still continued to produce cotton cloth by hand, but look at the situation. The British cotton that was taken, sent to Britain, manufactured into cloth, and brought all the way back to India and sold was still very cheaper and in much high quantity than the Indian cotton. Now, another place was Egypt. And for a brief period of time, Egypt had its, moment in the sun. The problem with Egypt being part of the Ottoman Empire is there were people in Egypt that viewed industrialization not as a good thing, but as letting in Western influence. And very rapidly, Egypt could not compete with the British in textiles. Eventually, what happens in Egypt is they come close not to paying their bills, and France and Great Britain also take it over. That's going to be talked about in Unit 6. So, overall, the old areas of production in the Middle East, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and in East Asia, China, they basically diminish as areas of production. Rather, they're viewed by the West as areas to get raw materials and as markets. And a lot of this was enforced by laws and tariffs. So, when you look at this entire topic, important takeaways. We started this as how did the Industrial Revolution spread? How did the Industrial Revolution change the modes and the locations of production? And we also integrated how technology also contributed to this. So, one key takeaway would be that the phases, the British phase focused on the use of coal and steam in the textiles and iron industries, and that the Western phase saw areas adopt industrialization. They still use coal power, but now they're being driven by economic nationalism. So you're seeing greater government involvement and you're seeing new industries to avoid competing with the British. That after 1850, we have this great change and technological development called the Second Industrial Revolution, in which new materials, new industries, and also new sources of power emerge. And this is going to lead to great demand for resources that industrial nations did not have. So during the global phase, starting in 1850, industrialization did spread to the Ottoman Empire, mostly Egypt, Russia, and Japan, because ultimately they were the ones that could organize the factors of production. But they're going to fundamentally change because they use state sponsored industrialization, integrating certain degrees of socialism, not to make the workers equal, but to give the government the leg up in being the entrepreneur. And they specialize in the production of steel, the building of railroads, and other things.